This will be my shortest video that I've done so far, and we're going to be doing Chapter 12. For the prompt, your ELL students may have difficulty with the analogies that are a big part of this method. What are 2 or more things you can do to scaffold, which is give help or support to? What are 2 or more things you can do to scaffold learning for your ELL students when using this method? So as you approach this one, think of your ELL students. Think of the difficulty they have with analogies. And if you don't know what an analogy is, it'll explain it in the book. And that's, things that are similar. This is like that. You have parallels between one concept, one organization, and another organization. There may be more familiar. So you state something that is unfamiliar in terms of things that are familiar, and that there are similarities between those. And that's what they're talking about, analogies. And so since your ELL students are still learning the English language, they might not have all the cultural knowledge either that a lot of native speakers of English might have also. So that's going to be a difficulty for you in using this method. So think of what you can do, 2 or more things you can do to scaffold your learning. Now, they have the vocabulary method that you've had earlier. There might be some other methods that you have. And don't assume that by just pairing up students and having them work in small groups that you're going to find someone that knows that. Because if most of them are ELL learners, then you have maybe 2 or 3 people that have no idea what some possible analogies are. So the better you know the English language, of course, and the better you know the culture, the easier it's going to be to come up with analogies. Now, if it's purely in Spanish, I'm not sure if they'll have analogies either, because I'm not sure how extensive their cultural knowledge of Mexico or whatever other Latin American country or Spain that they might have also. So assume that your students are coming with some disadvantages when it comes to using this method, and how are you going to overcome it if you are going to use it. Don't just say, I won't use it. You have to use it. So come up with a couple of things. Okay, this is an ethics model, developing creative thinking and problem solving. As I read this, it sounds very interesting. I didn't know about this when I was teaching 5th grade. I really haven't heard about this before. I might have seen the word before, but I've never studied it to the extent I am now. I've never gone to a conference, and I've never gone to a session at a conference that actually talked about this. So this is new to me. So I'm going to focus on only one part. Now, it talks in there, and it's very interesting, making the familiar strange. Now, that seems like it would be very appropriate for studying literature, especially children's literature, young adult literature, maybe teenage literature. That sounds very interesting. It has a lot of parallels with making the strange familiar. And my guess is that if you're in math or science, even language arts, that more often than not that you're going to be trying to make the strange familiar. And so I would suggest that you start out with this part of the theory, and if it works well for you and you can do it, you can handle it, then you go on to making the familiar strange, and you go and you read on that. But right now we're just going to concentrate on making the strange familiar. So you as the teacher have the greater burden. You need to provide information to your students. You need to look for the times when analogies are actually going to work, and you're going to actually teach these to your students, and you're going to have to scaffold them like we mentioned in the prompt in order to make this successful. But you provide information to them of what you're going to study, then you present the analogy, and then the students are going to come up with their own personal analogies to create their compressed conflicts. In other words, the analogies aren't perfectly aligned with the concept that you're learning, and sometimes they seem contradictory, some of the things you say, because when you're learning and you're being creative, it's not all neat and tidy. Sometimes it's a little bit messy, and so you use those personal analogies to create compressed conflicts. And you, as the teacher, are in charge, and you're going to be able to manage those things. This this part of the method seems a bit teacher-centered, but it has a lot of participation as well from the students. And then as you do those, you create your compressed conflicts. Then you compare the compressed conflicts with the subject again to see how closely they might align and how it might get students to think more creatively and more, or maybe even more precisely, about the subject that you are studying. And then, of course, you're going to identify differences, the differences between your analogies and the actual subject, and you're going to re-examine the original subject again and to see if that informs or helps an understanding of that original subject. And then you're going to create new direct analogies as well, student and teacher. So it's recursive. In other words, you go back and forth, and you keep refining it. Now, how much time do you have to do this? And is this the most efficient way of teaching the content? I'm not so sure. I can see this working very well in a GT or gifted and talented class, or if you're in high school and you're doing a college prep or an AP class, that might be helpful as well. I found that when I took the graduate record exam, that they had a math portion, and I really rarely, lots of times I didn't know the math, but I would play around with the numbers and the concepts, and eventually I would come up with the right answer, not even knowing how I came up with the right answer on the practice materials. But it requires some creativity. It's not always the person with the most knowledge of math is going to score the highest. Sometimes it's the person with the most creativity as they approach math. And if they can't remember the formula, can they still come up with the right answer? So look this over, see what you can get out of it. I would encourage you to try this, especially if you have some really high achieving students or a high achieving class. And that can be all the way from maybe very small to high school seniors, from kindergarten to high school seniors. But of course, it's going to be easier with the older the students are and the more cultural knowledge they have of the culture of being in Laredo, in Texas, in the United States, and being a part of the English language and about the culture. You can come up with analogies. And so if you have any questions on this, please let me know.